mind, but the news was just announced that WNBA TV ratings are down more than 50% since Caitlin Clark's injury. And it was also reported that the Indiana Fever television viewership is also down over 53%. Now, I know a lot of us were expecting some sort of dip since Caitlin Clark has been out with injury, but I don't think all of us were expecting the entire viewership of the entire WNBA.
Something extraordinary shook the world of professional sports. A league-long fighting for relevance suddenly became the center of global attention. Overnight, it went from overlooked to unstoppable, broadcast ratings skyrocketed, social media buzzed nonstop, and stadiums swelled with fans, celebrities, and journalists all eager to witness history. The energy was electric. For a moment, it felt like a true renaissance was unfolding in real time. This wasn't just a surge, it was a movement. A cultural reset. The WNBA had finally cracked the code. Or so it seemed. Then, just as quickly as it rose, the momentum vanished. The crowds disappeared. The energy drained. And the once sold-out arenas stood hollow and still, like monuments to a dream that came and went too fast. Viewership plummeted. Headlines went quiet. It didn't feel like a dip, it felt like a freefall. This wasn't a bump in the road. It was a devastating unraveling. And it sparked one overwhelming question: had the league's massive breakthrough been resting entirely on the back of a single 22-year-old rookie? And worse, had the organization silently watched its brightest star burn out, exposing a deeper, uncomfortable truth hiding just beneath the surface?
Is there any chance that the WNBA, that Kathy Engelbert saw some of the ratings that I'm about to show you now and said, hey, Indiana Fever, can you do us a favor? Can you do us a solid? Can you just tease a Caitlin Clark return, kind of boost these up a little bit? Can you just dangle a Caitlin Clark return in front of the fans' faces, try to boost these ratings up a little bit? There was one matchup that this league can consistently rely on to produce massive viewership.
For a brief but unforgettable stretch of time, the WNBA wasn't just thriving, it was the main event. And the force behind that meteoric rise? It had a name: the Caitlin Clark effect. This wasn't a slow build or gradual climb, it was a tidal wave. A seismic shift that carried the entire league into uncharted territory. For years, getting a WNBA game aired on a major network was a hard-fought battle, often ending in disappointment. But when Clark entered the scene, everything changed. Suddenly, her games weren't just televised, they were taking over primetime slots on national networks like ESPN and ABC. And the ratings? Unprecedented. We're talking 2, 3, even 4 million viewers for a regular season matchup, figures once considered impossible for the league. Numbers like that had only existed in daydreams just a season earlier. And the impact wasn't limited to screens. On the ground, the shift was even more dramatic. The Indiana Fever, a team that, not long ago, played in front of rows of empty seats, was now the hottest ticket in America. Sold-out crowds. Celebrity sightings. Media frenzy. It wasn't just basketball anymore. It was a phenomenon.
A shocker. Imagine my surprise. Just imagine my surprise when Uncle Casey found out that the WNBA is struggling to maintain their ratings without Caitlin Clark. To make matters worse, and this is something I have definitely noticed in the last 3 or 4 weeks, especially since the All-Star game, the WNBA seems to be struggling to maintain interest.
The demand was overwhelming and unprecedented. Teams began shifting their home games against the Indiana Fever from smaller venues to full-sized NBA arenas, desperate to meet the skyrocketing interest. And still, tickets vanished within minutes. Every seat, every section, gone. Meanwhile, Caitlin Clark's jersey didn't just top charts, it shattered records. Upon release, it became the highest-selling jersey across all sports, male or female. In a matter of weeks, she had become the face of a movement, drawing in casual viewers who'd never before tuned into a women's basketball game. For the first time, the WNBA had undeniable momentum, pulling in attention from every corner of the sports world. To many, it felt like the start of something lasting, like the birth of a new golden era. The league stood taller than ever before, riding a wave of relevance and revenue unlike anything it had seen. But in the midst of the celebration, something critical was overlooked. In business, especially in the volatile world of entertainment, there's one rule you can never afford to forget: you protect your crown jewel at all costs. And in this case, the crown jewel was a 22-year-old rookie carrying the weight of an entire league on her back.
Clark, the operative word that comes to my mind is gratitude. there's an incredible level of gratitude that should be accorded to this young lady with what she did for the sport.
How was the attendance for Team USA in the Olympics? What would it have been like if Caitlin Clark was playing on that team? Remember the first game? Look at this right here. National broadcast viewership. What are we talking about here? 1,000, what is that? 1.219? Is that the number? And the game afterwards got 485,000. So the Fever and their game against the Minnesota Lynx was 1.2.
The illusion shattered the moment Caitlin Clark was forced to the sidelines with an injury. Almost instantly, the magic disappeared, and the harsh truth began to surface. There was no slow decline. This was a sharp, devastating drop-off. The numbers told the story better than words ever could. Industry reports started flooding in, each one painting a more troubling picture than the last. Across the WNBA, TV ratings weren't just dipping, they were in freefall. League-wide viewership had reportedly plunged by a staggering 50%. The Indiana Fever, once the centerpiece of the league's explosive rise, saw their audience vanish by over 53%. Let that sink in. That's the equivalent of a blockbuster film franchise suddenly losing more than half its fanbase overnight. In any industry, that's not just a setback, it's a full-blown commercial crisis. And as the ratings collapsed, so did the in-person energy. The packed, high-voltage arenas that had become the league's new visual identity reverted back to the past, rows upon rows of empty chairs, the echoes of hype replaced with silence. The contrast was jarring. What once looked like organic growth now felt more like a mirage, brief, bright, and built on one player's shoulders. It raised a difficult question: was the boom real, or was it just a temporary illusion propped up by a single breakout star?
These black superstars should thank their lucky stars for the record ratings Caitlin Clark is detonating, even if new fans are mostly white fans. It doesn't matter what color eyeballs are. But the other day, I must admit, it hit me like Katie Bell Henderson telling me that's enough. I told myself it's not racist for me to lie.
The curiosity-driven wave that had brought millions of new eyes to the WNBA was gone. Just like that. The casual fans, those who had tuned in to witness the spectacle of Caitlin Clark, vanished the moment she was no longer on the court. Without the headliner, the show lost its spark. And so, they flipped the channel. What remained was an uncomfortable truth: the league's sudden rise in popularity had been far more fragile than anyone wanted to admit. It wasn't a deep foundation, it was a house of cards. And when Caitlin Clark disappeared from the lineup, it wasn't just one card being pulled. The entire structure came crashing down. But dwindling viewership and half-empty arenas weren't the root cause, they were just the visible symptoms. The real issue was brewing behind the scenes. Inside the WNBA's front office, something troubling was unfolding. Instead of acknowledging the obvious, league officials began spinning a narrative that felt disconnected from reality, almost delusional. Rather than addressing the clear over-reliance on a single superstar, leadership seemed more interested in preserving appearances than asking hard questions. And that decision would only deepen the cracks already forming beneath the surface.
WNBA has a problem. And that problem is Caitlin Clark not playing in WNBA games. Now, what all does this affect? The ratings are plummeting. Guys, there's ratings for a couple of these games.
While the league was clearly struggling, its momentum fading and its numbers collapsing, WNBA Commissioner Cathy Engelbert stepped into the spotlight with a very different story. Instead of acknowledging the growing crisis, she took to the airwaves with unwavering optimism, insisting the league was stronger than ever. In a string of public appearances and national interviews, Engelbert painted a picture of success, touting historic growth, a surging fan base, and unprecedented engagement. But the timing couldn't have been more surreal. These rosy declarations came during the exact same week reports confirmed a jaw-dropping 50% drop in viewership. The contrast was almost surreal. As fans, analysts, and networks grappled with the harsh reality, the commissioner appeared unfazed, speaking as though the league was in the midst of a golden era. It wasn't just spin. It felt like a complete detachment from the facts on the ground. To many, it looked less like leadership and more like illusion. A PR sleight of hand. While the foundation cracked beneath her feet, she performed for the cameras, an executive so focused on controlling the narrative that she seemed blind to the fire burning behind her. It was denial wrapped in optimism, broadcast in HD. And it left a growing number of people wondering, was this confidence, or just carefully packaged delusion?
Trend that the WNBA is excited about. That's a trend that Cathy Engelbert would say, hey, Fever, hey, Lynn Dunn, hey, Kelly, hey, Amber, can you guys start dangling that Caitlin Clark return like you used to do? You know, before Caitlin Clark gave a statement and you guys were hands off? Can you guys, just string them along a little bit more? We want to get these ratings back up. We want to get
The league's refusal to confront the obvious collapse didn't just frustrate people, it outraged them. Fans, analysts, and commentators weren't just questioning the leadership's optimism, they were offended by it. This wasn't seen as hopeful messaging, it was perceived as outright disrespect. Viewers could see the empty seats, the plummeting numbers, and the fading buzz. Yet the league kept insisting everything was fine. To many, it felt like the WNBA was gaslighting its own audience, telling them to ignore the facts staring them in the face. The result? A growing perception that the league's leadership wasn't just out of step, it was fundamentally unfit to handle adversity. The message coming from the top didn't inspire confidence. Instead, it exposed a worrying lack of accountability. When problems arose, they weren't addressed, they were denied. As Commissioner Engelbert continued promoting a version of reality that no longer matched what fans were witnessing, the disconnect grew wider. It painted a picture of an organization more concerned with image than substance. Meanwhile, while executives clung to their fantasy of progress, the players on the court were left to face a much harsher truth. Game after game, they dealt with real pressure, real risks, and real consequences. The spotlight had faded, but the weight they carried remained. The leadership had the luxury of denial. The players didn't.
Indiana, against the Chicago Sky, right after that game, they opened an investigation once again into the fans, where they found nothing, but the damage had already been done at that point. If some of these things happen just one time here and there, or there's one certain media personality who's just always saying these kind of things, then whatever. I feel like fans as a whole can be like, okay, whatever, this person is just a hater. But this is something that has happened over and over and over again, and over time, it starts chipping away at how much you're going to actually care and want to support an organization if they continue to do.
Caitlin Clark's injury didn't come out of nowhere. For those who had been watching closely, it didn't feel like bad luck, it felt inevitable. The result of months of unchecked, escalating physicality. This wasn't one isolated hit. It was the culmination of a season-long pattern that had been hiding in plain sight. From the very start of her professional career, Clark wasn't treated as the league's rising star. She wasn't protected like a generational talent, she was targeted. Opponents didn't just play her hard, they played her dangerously. Hip checks far from the ball. Blindsided shoves. Elbows that never got whistled. Game after game, the hits kept coming, and the officials stayed silent. There seemed to be an unspoken double standard. Fouls that would have drawn instant whistles for others were shrugged off when it came to Clark. And no matter how aggressive the contact, the refs rarely stepped in. It was as if she was playing under a different set of rules. This wasn't just a lapse in officiating, it was a failure of protection. The WNBA had a once-in-a-generation star. A player who brought millions of new viewers, sold out arenas, and injected real money into the league. But instead of shielding her from harm, the system left her exposed, game after game, collision after collision. In any other business, when your biggest asset is under threat, you act. You reinforce, you protect, you prioritize. But here, the league's most valuable player was left to absorb the punishment alone. And eventually, her body gave out.
Clark thing, man. I mean, it's embarrassing. It is embarrassing what you guys have done. And then people are catching on to your tactics. You got the people on Twitter catching on to your tactics. Like, look at this right here. Look at this right here. They say ESPN didn't want to show the ratings were down from WNBA All-Star Game because
The lack of protection wasn't just careless, it was staggering. And if the physical toll on Caitlin Clark didn't make that clear enough, what came next left no room for doubt. In a move that sent shockwaves through the sports world, Team USA announced its Olympic roster, and Clark's name was nowhere on it. The league's most talked about player, the athlete who had driven unprecedented attention and revenue into women's basketball, was left off the biggest international stage. The decision was baffling. Instead of embracing the sport's most visible star, officials doubled down on familiarity, choosing a lineup of seasoned veterans over the one player millions of new fans had tuned in to see. To the public, it didn't feel like a strategic choice. It felt personal. Political. A calculated snub by the establishment, aimed at putting the breakout rookie back in her place. The message rang loud and clear, we don't need you. And we won't protect you. It wasn't just a missed opportunity, it was a public relations disaster. Rather than leveraging Clark's global appeal to boost the profile of Team USA and women's basketball on the Olympic stage, the gatekeepers slammed the door shut. And fans noticed. But just when it seemed the league's self-inflicted wounds couldn't get any deeper, another blow landed, this time from within. One of the WNBA's other brightest young stars made headlines of her own by walking away, fed up with the dysfunction. The cracks weren't just visible, they were widening fast.
What you owe us? That looks like a ham sandwich and some Lay's tater chips right now. It's getting bad. I feel bad for Caitlin Clark. She come out and said on Sue Bird's podcast that she's feeling the pressure of not playing in these games. And that Fever Sky viewership fell off the map.
Just as the controversy over Caitlin Clark's injury and Olympic snub was reaching a fever pitch, another shockwave hit the WNBA. Angel Reese, the electrifying, outspoken rookie from the Chicago Sky, walked away from the game midseason, leaving her team and the league in stunned silence. This wasn't a random benching or a brief hiatus. Reese was the other face of the league's rookie class, a player whose fierce on-court battles with Clark, dating back to their college rivalry, had captivated fans and defined the season's biggest storylines. Her sudden exit sent a clear message: the league's issues were deeper and more widespread than a single injury or controversy. This wasn't an isolated incident, it was a symptom of a larger, systemic problem eating away at the heart of the WNBA. Reese's departure ripped off the Band-Aid, exposing cracks that had long been ignored. It highlighted a league struggling not just to retain talent, but to support and protect the very players fueling its brief rise. The WNBA's golden moment was slipping through its fingers, and the warning signs couldn't be clearer.
News and some bad news for those who are fans of pretend basketball. For those who are desperate to see the WNBA succeed, even though this dump of a league can't seem to get the hell out of their own way. Now, the WNBA, they refer to these people as fans, but the rest of us, we prefer to call them the mainstream media.
Culture within the league was proving to be an unforgiving storm, one so toxic and high pressure that it was burning out its brightest new stars before their very first seasons had even ended. Angel Reese's departure didn't just add to the crisis, it shifted the entire conversation. What had started as a story about the league failing Caitlin Clark quickly evolved into something far more alarming: the league failing its players. The two young pillars expected to carry the WNBA's future had both collapsed in rapid succession. Clark, sidelined by a serious injury rooted in what many called league negligence. Reese, walking away, citing an environment so intolerable that staying was no longer an option. With its marquee talent diminished and its leadership trapped in denial, the WNBA found itself at a dangerous crossroads. The very people who fueled the league's rise, its players, its fans, its core community, began to question their faith. The foundation was cracking, and those who mattered most were starting to turn their backs.
You see, this is exactly what we were talking about. WNBA All-Star ratings are in for 2025, and it is down 40%. 40% from last year. That's bad. That is really bad. We already watched the ticket prices drop by more than 50% because Caitlin Clark was not playing. This is bad news for the
Backlash from fans wasn't a quiet murmur, it was a full-throated roar echoing across the digital world. Just weeks earlier, social media had been awash with clips celebrating Caitlin Clark's brilliance and the league's surge in popularity. But overnight, that enthusiasm curdled into anger and disappointment. Platforms once filled with praise turned into battlegrounds. Every official WNBA post, no matter how small or routine, was bombarded by a wave of furious comments demanding change. "Protect your players" became the rallying cry of a disillusioned fanbase unwilling to stay silent. Fan-made videos exposing a cascade of uncalled fouls against Clark went viral, racking up millions of views and shining a harsh light on the league's failure to safeguard its star. Memes flooded timelines, empty arenas juxtaposed with images of Commissioner Kathy Engelbert, who seemed oblivious, fiddling while Rome burned. The message from the fans was crystal clear: they felt utterly betrayed. The league had built a fragile empire on the backs of its players and the passion of its supporters, and now, both had been abandoned.
Guys can sit there and say, "Oh, you guys are just trying to uplift one player. Oh, the league is more than one." I agree, the league is more than one player. It's more than one good basketball player. But is there more than one player that moves the tide?
The fans weren't just casual observers, they had invested deeply. They bought the tickets, wore the jerseys, and paid for subscriptions. They gave their time, their energy, their passion, all believing they were part of something historic, something transformative. But instead of feeling empowered, they felt deceived, like they'd been sold a story that was collapsing before their eyes. The WNBA, for many, became a cautionary tale of missed opportunities, sinking under a lethal mix of arrogance and mismanagement. This wasn't simply about losing casual viewers anymore. The league was alienating its most loyal supporters, the backbone of its growth and survival. It was hemorrhaging viewers, money, and the one asset no league can survive without: goodwill. And that brings us to a daunting question, one that haunts the league's future. For weeks, the WNBA's media partners, like ESPN, had been the league's biggest advocates. They rode the Caitlin Clark wave, dedicating entire segments to her jaw-dropping plays and celebrating record-breaking ratings. They were an essential part of the hype machine, fueling excitement and building anticipation. But when the ratings crashed, dropping by 50%, the story changed dramatically. Suddenly, those same broadcasters who'd been lauding Clark as the sports savior were forced to grapple with a harsh new reality: the league was imploding. On-air personalities awkwardly shifted gears, discussing the plummeting numbers and the growing crisis. The WNBA's carefully crafted spin machine was unraveling in real time. No longer in control of the narrative, the league faced a relentless tide of negative coverage from even its most loyal media allies, all desperate to keep their own credibility intact. The image of unstoppable growth was shattering under the weight of undeniable facts. Yet, while the media narrative was collapsing, an even more urgent crisis was developing in the league's financials. Before Clark's injury, tickets to Indiana Fever games were a prized commodity. On secondary markets like StubHub, even the highest seats were selling for hundreds of dollars. Courtside seats went for thousands. Scalpers thrived. The market was red hot. Then, after the injury, it all froze. Ticket prices plunged so dramatically that many were sold for less than the cost of a stadium hot dog. Rows of premium seats sat empty, available for pocket change. This wasn't just a setback, it was a financial bloodbath for resellers and a public embarrassment for the league. And the damage wasn't confined to Indiana. The Clark bump that had elevated attendance and ticket prices across the WNBA vanished overnight. Merchandise sales stalled. Sponsors who once lined up, eager to invest, started to pull back, reassessing their bets. The league's failure to protect its biggest star had sparked a crisis that threatened not only this season's profits but its long-term viability. Television contracts, sponsorship deals, everything was now on shaky ground. At the heart of this meltdown was one glaring truth: a core failure of stewardship that becomes even more shocking when you look next door. Consider this: what would the NBA do if a rookie with Caitlin Clark's talent and impact showed up? They'd treat her like a priceless masterpiece. The NBA immediately issues memos to referees. Every aggressive move against their star players is called swiftly and firmly. Those athletes are shielded relentlessly because the NBA knows its stars are the product. They don't let icons like LeBron James or Stephen Curry get battered night after night. Their culture of officiating ensures marquee players stay on the court, healthy and dominating. The WNBA, by contrast, watched their once-in-a-generation talent get pummeled, and did nothing. This wasn't just a failure of competence, it was a profound lapse in business judgment. The blueprint for success was right there, in their corporate family. The NBA had shown the way. All the WNBA had to do was follow it. Instead, they treated their brightest star like a disposable piece in a demolition derby. This stark contrast makes one thing clear: the WNBA's crisis wasn't an accident. It was a choice. So, where does the league stand now? At the heart of a crisis it created itself. Given a generational talent who transformed them into the most talked-about league in sports, the WNBA had everything: a global spotlight, a new legion of fans, and a clear path to lasting success. But instead of seizing that moment, they were swallowed by a perfect storm: failure to protect their stars, leadership locked in denial, and a fanbase feeling utterly betrayed. The 2024 WNBA season will be remembered as a cautionary tale, a golden opportunity squandered. They held a winning lottery ticket in their hands. The question now is, did they tear it up right in front of the whole world? And will they ever be trusted with another?